We're so delighted that you joined us today for another edition in the Lipedema Channel interview series. And today I am honored to introduce you to Susan Mortarelli. She has Dercum's. She also has an amazing history. In 2014, she was bedridden, and oh boy, she's not any longer. And she is a vocal advocate for our community. And I can't wait for you to find out more about her. Susan, it's so nice to have you here today.
Thank you, Brenda. It is such an honor and pleasure to be here.
Well, it's our honor. And so let's start with, how did all of this journey begin for you? You're
Okay.
obviously not bedridden today.
Yeah, no. And that's why I've been very vocal in different conferences. So my story is that I'm gonna kind of start back now. As a teenager, I always had a very unusual body. I was a mesomorph, right? Super sports kid, but my arms and my legs, I was just, people would be like, wow, you have such amazing muscles. And I'm like, no, I really think that that's just this compact. It felt like tumorish, weird. I would have called it fat, but whatever, right? Fast forward, I had a very healthy life. I did have, some crazy like PCOS, hyperthyroidism, blah, 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 endometriosis, infertility, right? Some other things that do come up in the lipedema world. But when I hit, I'm going to say when I hit my like 48, so I played soccer 3 times a week. I was a medical device auditor on my feet all my time because I'm an engineer and medical device auditor on my feet all the time. And I noticed that I was starting to get really itchy up under my armpits, in through my breast, and there were these lumps. And I have a family history of cancer. So you have to realize my father died of a rare anaplastic lung cell cancer. My mother died of rare ovarian Mullerian cell cancer. My brother has non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. So I started going to all the doctors. I went to my endocrinologist. He was like, yeah, there's nothing wrong. Your CRP, which is your inflammation's a little high, but you're good. Went to my gynecologist. She could feel them. And she's like, Susan, I don't know. We put markers on them and they were just fatty tissue, fatty tumors. Okay, fine. Like that's what they call them. You've got fatty, blah, 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 right? So then I go back and I wasn't feeling well. I had this pain here and right under your sternum. And I'm like, I feel toxic and poisoned. Back to my endocrinologist. He's like, let's run some gastroenterology tests, blah, blah, blah. Barium swallow, all that stuff. Susan, you're normal. I'm like, something is wrong with me.
How frustrating was that to know that your body is talking to you,
exactly.
And yet the doctors are telling you, no,
so
you're
ladies, you know your body. You know when something isn't right. And that's one of my biggest, for foundations is, keep advocating for yourself. So then it was so weird. I started forming weird, like an itchy, like my skin was on fire and itchy. And then I'd feel these lumps. And I'm going, what the heck? They were in my arm, in my, cubital area, behind my knees, in the crest, thinking, what the heck is going on? So finally, during this time, my body was in so much pain. I was not able to sleep no matter what. I hurt. My daughter poked me and I'm like, you hit one of those things. She's like, that can't hurt. I'm like, no, that hurts so much, right? Couldn't have the catwalk on my legs. So now this is like I'm going to say 2012 was when I was going to the doctor saying something's wrong, and on and on and on and on. Finally, by the beginning of 2014, I was hiking with my husband. I stepped off a rock and I had knee surgeries because I had a catastrophic soccer accident in 2008. Anyways, long story short, step off the rock, get an MRI. They say, we think you have PVNS. And I said, I have PVNS, what the heck is that? It's a type of cancer that makes these nodules or tumors in your joints. They do the biopsy. They're like, Susan, it's not PVNS. We don't know what it is. Okay, fine. Go back to my life. But I was just starting to really slow down. And my family said, what's going on with you? You look like you have moon face, so swollen, right? And I kept saying to my doctor, I have cankles. I've never had cankles in my life. Like, I'm so swollen. You could hook a pin and, right? It hurt to stand. It hurt to lie. It hurt everything. That was
I'm going
when
to interrupt
the
you for
bedridden
just
piece.
1 second
Yeah.
because right now, you have just painted the picture of so many women that are watching right now. And I want you to take heart and take hope from this amazing woman because she hasn't even gotten to the lowest part in her journey. But first of all, active, vibrant, intelligent, engaged in life, and then sucker punched
Yeah.
with all of this. We want you to know there is hope. So you kept
Absolutely.
listening to yourself, and what was your next step?
So I was on an audit in Pittsburgh, which is my hometown. I live near outside of Boston right now. And I collapsed on the audit. And my brother had called me and he's like, what are you doing? He's like, go see Zach. So Zach is my family oncologist. It's a family oncologist, right? But he was brought in on my mother's case. My mother was actually stage 4 out of stage 5 ovarian cancer. And again, when my brother felt these nodules in his neck, he was the one who went to Zach and he found it stage 2. Like, so he said, Susan, why are you messing around? Go see Zach. So that was October of 2014. And I had already been to about 10 plus doctors, okay? Had done all kinds of things, rheumatologists, you name it. And he ran that first day, 37 vials of blood. I was standing there with my arm, right? 37 vials of blood, CT scans, etc. And then he said, Susan, we're gonna biopsy a new one and an old one. So they took a new one that was forming in my inguinal area, which is where your hip crease is, and then the not that you can really see it. You can't really see it, but there's about a 2-inch scar right here in the cubital area. It was like the size bigger than a walnut. And so Dr. Yude said, Susan, you'll be in and out 15 minutes. Let's do it under local, which is good because I have a history with not doing well with anesthesia. So an hour and 15 minutes later, Brenda, he is, cutting and pulling and resecting. And he's like, Susan, I don't know what this is, but number one, it's wrapped around blood vessels and nerve tissue. And he said, number two, whatever it is, it's inoperable. I've never seen anything like this in my 25 years. So for you people that have Dercums and lipedema, and you wonder why I'm not all hacked up, it's because of what Dr. Yude said, okay? I did not realize, and because that, and I had this sense in my mind because it was like all throughout my body. So the very interesting thing is that we did those biopsies. 2 months later, Zach, I felt bad because I was taking his time from cancer patients. And he's like, no, Susan, oncology is the study of cells. You are rare. This is okay. He called me in and he said, I know what it is. He said, I called my people at the NIH. This is Dercum disease. And I said, oh my gosh, wow. Like, right? And again, because my parents died young, 13 when my father died, 25 when my mother died. I don't know medical history. So you need to know your medical history in your family, no matter what. So important. So long story short, he gives me this piece of paper. It says NordGuard, the American Pain Association, and the Dercum Society, which is this one lady out in California. Now I'm in Boston, East Coast time. I call and it was like 6 a.m. or 4 a.m. and she yelled at me and I got up enough courage to call back and she said, Susan, it's a Christmas miracle. I can move my big toe. And I said, you know what, Maureen? No, I am a very faithful person. And I said, I will not, like, this is not going to happen. No. And I just knew that there's got to be a connection. And again, I love the human body, etc. So I kept studying. So what's interesting is for pain, Dr. Spiegelman gave me gabapentin. The first dose, I was like, oh my gosh, my pain is gone. The second dose sent me into anaphylaxis. Thank God my brother was in the car with me. And we were going for a CT scan and my throat closed up, my lips turned blue. He was like, he just took over and pulled into the emergency room. Thankfully. So I know that I have a rare body. I'm allergic to a lot of pain meds. Like I said, I don't do well with anesthesia. Like I've known this all my life. So I said, no, I have, with the lymphoma of my brother, that's what kind of said, I think this is a lymphatic thing. Again, you know, you've got like the T6 and your other cytokines that go crazy, right? So that's why I said, I'm going to do everything lymphatically I can for my body. And so at that point in time, even though I've always eaten really healthy. Again, you know, mother's a nurse. She was the one who's talked about the fat cells, like seriously, from the time I was little. Susan, you have to stay in good shape. You create more fat cells when you're in like this certain period of time. Like, anyways, so always ate healthy, yet and exercised and etc. But I guess the point is that I started going to an acupuncturist.
Hmm.
I started doing Ayurveda and yoga and all those kinds of things. And so this is now the beginning of 2014. And I read every paper written on Dercums. There's about, at that point, there was like 140 of them. I found that Dr. Rebecca Campen, who was at Mass General Hospital, she wrote the 2012 NORD description. I went and saw her. I gave
How
my family,
exciting for you to discover in your research that there was someone in your area of the
and
country.
that's just it. Is I was looking to every hospital of the papers that were doctors wrote, right? That was my search. Found her, and she agreed, yes, you have Dercums. And she said to me, you know, Susan, watch your weight, try to get it down, keep exercising, moderate, you know, not to do this. She's like, support system. She's like, your husband's with you, you know, that's all I can offer you. There is no cure. And I said, all right, I get that. And,
Forgive
you know,
my ignorance because I'm much more well versed in lipedema
yep.
than I am in Dercums. But so was the perimenopause the trigger?
Well, now that I look back, no. I think what it was though, so you know how I said to you, again, these doctors think I have more Dercum. So I'm going to give you two more stories, and then I'm going to tell you what I think.
Ooh, I love
So,
stories.
so I was, as I was reading the papers, I found out that Håkan Borson out of Sweden and his team, they said, hey, you know, liposuction is the way to go. It was bringing down people's pain. And they did it on 53 Dercum's women. So at that point in time, I had just watched the FDRS 2015 Washington, D.C. thing, got myself geared up that I was going to go to the next one, but they didn't have one in 2000, or I guess it was 2014, 2015, they didn't have one. But in the meantime, when I was looking for surgeons that would do liposuction, I came across a lot of stuff about Dr. Joseph Stutz, and that was why I was gearing myself towards Dr. Marcia Bird in Atlanta. But in the meantime, I met Catherine Seo, and she said, Susan, have you ever heard of lipedema? And I'm like, no, like, what's that? And so she started explaining to me about lipedema, and I thought, oh, that's very interesting. Like, similar, but not really, of what was going on in my body. So then I knew that there was a study at NIH, and they were taking Dercums, but they wanted familial Dercums people. So in the long story short, I ended up finding out that my aunt, who is my mom's sister, youngest sister, right? She has these big, huge lipomas all over her body, looks like a nodular Dercums person, but has no pain. And that's called familial multiple lipomatosis. I start asking my brother. He's like, yeah, he goes, I have some lipomas in my stomach, but they don't bother me. He's like, yeah, like this one, maybe a little. So I called NIH and said, here is my history. And they took the three of us. And at the time, my kids were too young, and my niece and my nephew, they took some blood samples from them. But we went in and did the Dercum's familial study on and that was in 2015. That was October of 2015. And after I'd seen Dr. Campen, I said, you know what, I've got to go see, because I actually asked her, I said, do you think I should go see Dr. Harp? She's like, I don't know what for. And I was like, yeah, you know what, I'm just going to go meet everybody I can. And so I took my family out there. Now, this is another interesting piece of the story, especially for you lipedema ladies. So my daughter uh, doesn't have the same body as me, not the same body type, okay? But played sports, very athletic. And at 13, when she started menstruation like at 11. But then all of a sudden it stopped. I was suspicious because she was putting on weight that she might have Hashimoto's or hypothyroidism. I had it at 16, she had it. So we started off to Boston Children's Hospital and their endocrinology clinic. So finding out finally at 14, between 14 and 15, her thyroid tests show that yes, she's got Hashimoto's. Then, same endocrinologist, we find out she's got PCOS and she's got androgen issues. This is now between, 13 to 16, or well, almost 16, 13, and the same 2012 to 2014 time period. Long story short is that I said to my husband when the whole family went out to Arizona, I said, I'm allowed to take one person in and I want to take her in with me. And he said, okay. I take her in and Dr. Herbst looks at her and she said, classic lipedema. Size 4, her hips, her thighs, never had a calf in her life, right? That's not my body shape. Classic lipedema at age 16. She had just turned 16. Okay.
I say when I hear that, what a blessing to be able to identify it so early on. There are so many women I speak with that are in their 40s, 50s, even 60s until they got diagnosed. And kudos to you for being such a good mom.
But that's why we have to do this. We have to be advocates for our daughters. And so early on, I had said to you, I took that information back to Boston Children's Hospital. You know why? Because they were putting her on this optimal weight for life program, and it was not making a difference in her body shape. And so I said, she has lipedema. You need to understand what lipedema is. I have Dercums. You need to understand there's a connection. And again, then when I finally got to the 2016 FDRS, Dr. Emily Eicher spoke about how actually you can start to see those changes in some of the young girls, even as early as 5 or 6, if you really know what you're looking for. Isn't that amazing?
It is amazing.
Absolutely amazing. And so that's why, and we know it's genetic, we know it runs in families. So let me tell you the outcome of all of this, right? So my daughter, my beautiful daughter, started at puberty. My beautiful niece, who is now 36, and she's not admitting this, but beautiful shape again, but has a 4-year-old son, and we have all noticed, my brother and I, and we have all noticed that right now she's starting to put on that classic lipedema shape. My cousin, one of my cousins, went and had gastric bypass because she and her sister has the columnar legs but super skinny, right? She has always been rather large, like over 300 pounds, rather large. She decided to go for gastric bypass, has been successful in losing 120 pounds, but the lipedema shape is still there. And so she's listening. I took my aunt to the second, the one with the FML, took her to the second, or the one down in Dallas, I guess it was the 2018 FDRS conference. And she participated in research. And so she not only has FML, she only weighs 120 pounds, but she has the lower lipedema legs. When I look now back at pictures of my mother and my aunt, they were, so two sisters, my mother again had the lipedema legs, not so much. She probably was like a stage 1, 2, because she was a nurse. She always wore compression, right, and etc. My other nurse, a school teacher, has the definite lipedema shape. And what's interesting is she just said to me, she's lost about 45 pounds. She said to me, Susan, I have those nodule things in my arms. So it's so amazing. You need, and it's hard to talk to family about it. I know that they don't want to listen at first, but just keep presenting evidence.
Yeah.
you know?
So you went to your physicians and medical team and said, you need to know about this.
I keep going back to them.
Yeah, and you have continued to be your own advocate. Clearly, you're doing great things to manage your condition because you have amazing energy and you're helping so many other people. I want to get into what you are doing to help the community, but how are you currently managing your condition?
So the biggest relief in pain, so you have to understand my pain was so bad. And when I talk bedridden, I mean bedridden. It hurt to lie. It hurt for anything. And my family knows this. They understand what I've gone through. And and so in 2000, oh gosh, Melissa was a senior. We basically, I went and sought out Dr. Bird and I took Melissa with me and we went and had a consult together and we were looking at colleges in the area. So she gave me the thing and said, hey, this is what I could do for surgery. And this is way before all of this advocacy to get covered, right? And I was in such pain. I was like, okay, I saw on Facebook a friend of mine posted that she'd had surgery with her and she didn't have the pain in her arms and the stinging, burning pain. And that was like, okay. I called and I took the last 2 appointments of the year. My paperwork didn't get done, but my daughter's did. So my daughter was the guinea pig. She went and had arms and legs done. And the confidence it gave her was amazing. Absolutely amazing. That she was like, look, I had muscles under there in my calves all the time and her arms. She was just thrilled. Yet she understands for her how absolutely difficult it is that everybody else can eat anything they want. And yet she, but she's, and again, I've always focused healthy, healthy, healthy. Do stuff for your heart health. Do stuff for your flexibility, right? So I went and had mine in March, and that took me from my 20/10 pain. Like who gets surgery? And the day after surgery, I'm like showing my husband, look, I can do squats again. Like that's insane. And all the doctors are like, that's kind of unusual. That's how much pain I was out of. Now, that was in March of 2017.
Okay, and the surgery you had was classic. Was it water
So
assisted
it was
liposuction?
bladder-assisted liposuction, and it was with Dr. Bird. But what we've found out now is that um, it did not take away all of my Dercum's lipomatous tissue. And actually, a surgeon that I'm talking with now, because what it did do though is it took care of some of the lymphedema, which I found out as of last year. I had a lymphoscintigraphy and a ICG lymphography, and I have mild lymphedema. My everything is intact, but it's just mild. It's sluggish, especially on the right side, and in some areas where there's some lipomas, that corresponds to you've got some areas of some diffuse patterns. But what they have been telling me is that, Susan, you still have tissue. Your limbs weren't normalized enough tissue was not removed. And so they've prescribed a plan. And
Let me
I'll
just
work
go
on it.
back because I know a lot of people's ears are perking up. Women that I've talked to, they just are looking for answers and they will try anything. They want to get better. They don't want this to progress. The two tests you mentioned, IC green and lymphoscintigraphy,
Mhm.
are these, did you have to go somewhere special to get that kind of testing?
Yes and no. So, because I live outside of Boston, this is the scoop. In Boston, the Beth Israel Deaconess Medical Center has become a LEARN, Lymphatic Education and Resource Network Center of Excellence, right?
Yeah.
And they are really more geared right now towards lymphedema, but they will take people and help people to get identified as, because that's part of when they signed up for that COE, that's the Center of Excellence, they were required, hey, we have to start to have a plan for lipedema.
Mm.
So again, so for example, I just had a study done because they wanted to look for my venous insufficiency, because that runs in parallel with lymphedema. They did what's called an MRI of my pelvis and legs. What that lets them see is that MRI lets them see, number one, is there more fluid, or is your lymphedema more fluid based, or is it more fat based? And then secondly, it doesn't tell them, is this lipomatous fat? It just shows fat versus the bones versus the, MRI, the fat versus fluid. And then the lymphoscintigraphy, what that does is that the lymphoscintigraphy is a nuclear test where they inject into your, like in your, if this was your foot, they would inject 2 spaces here and then 1 by your ankle, and the dye, and then what they do is they scan your body initially, and then they scan it like every 45 minutes to see how your lymphatic system uptakes that dye. And so the technician noticed that on the right-hand side, for me, it wasn't moving as quickly, but then eventually, it did catch up. People with true lymphedema will have such blockage where the dye will just like stay at their feet or not progress in certain areas, and they look for those patterns. And so what's interesting is a lot of women with lipedema, they go and have that lymphoscintigraphy done. It looks like they have a normal lymphoscintigraphy, right? But then that's where the ICG lymphography is a newer test, and there's not as many of those around the United States. That ICG lymphography, so ICG is isocyanide green, and it's a dye that they, again, inject. And then they use a fluoroscope, which is a handheld device, and they follow the path and they can see it, the lymphatic system as it moves. You can watch a lot of stuff up on YouTube about this. And I know on the Learn, Dr. Wei Chen and Dr. Singhal have both put some videos up about that. So with that, they can really tell real time what's happening. And there's a method to that. And so because of that, that was what was able to, I didn't have a baseline before my liposuction, but that was where he said, I'm suspicious. Also, what was interesting on mine, it was that he said when he injected it, it immediately transversed to lymphatics under my arm, as opposed to ones where a lot of the normal population have it a little differently, where it'll go into different lymphatic channels. Mine just used other lymphatic channels. So it just raises some questions. Like, oh, that's
So
interesting.
we've done some thought leadership pieces on how mapping the lymphatics is really the next era for customized care for people, because it's not one size fits all.
Yeah, in Australia, they're using ICG for lymphatic treatment of the MLD patients, which is fabulous.
So your test determined that while your surgery was a success, there was still some issue. There were still some issues that needed to be
I
addressed.
still have more tissue that must be removed. And so I will get on that path. But this is the other thing I want the ladies to take home, because there is a lot that you can do without having surgery. And I totally want everyone to exhaust those as well. I understand the pain you're in. Believe me, I understand the pain you're in. I could hardly walk to my mailbox. I actually, in my FDRS YouTube video, I talk about, it was so bad and so painful for me that I was walking like a 90-year-old woman, which made no sense. Here I was, a soccer player who played, 90-minute games, to barely being able to walk. And it was so bad that I remember walking to the corner and looking up at my neighbor's tree and realizing I had never seen these beautiful polka dots inside the bloom of the flower, right? That's pretty slow. But that's what's so amazing. And so in some ways it has given me a new ability to look at life and really cherish what's absolutely important. And that's what's important, is to cherish and support and love us, everybody, and to help. It's really important for me to help other women along on their journey. Absolutely. And if that's, so I had to leave a job I absolutely love. Brenda, that was my life. It was my passion to be a medical device auditor. I actually saw how MRI machines and magnets were made, and defibrillators and surgical lighting,
which
and you name
has
it.
really informed. I mean, you should be, I should say, Dr. Susan Mortarelli, because
No.
you use the language so fluidly, and I'm still learning it. But your medical device background has helped you become such a powerful spokesperson. You speak the language of the medical language, but also the patient language, which is so special.
You've made a very important comment, is that ladies, in your care, you need to use the medical language. So for example, and this is a big proponent, what we're proponing now is that I know that Dercum disease is, it's named after Dr. Dercum, but on my chart and on the majority of the people who have it, it is lipomitosis dolorosa. The ICD, which is the International Diagnosis Code, is E88.2, lipomitosis, and in brackets, Dercum. And again, it's within this metabolic range of diseases. Like I talked about FML, familial multiple lipomatosis. MSL, multiple symmetric lipomitosis, is again another similar one. Sometimes people talk about that as being Madelung's disease. And so it's interesting. So when earlier you said, were you lipedema or not? I've gone back. So for one of my talks, I went back to all the pictures from birth on up. And do you know that I found pictures at age 22 that you could see the lumps in my arms and in my thighs? And I thought, oh my gosh. And I didn't even see it. I just like sent them to a friend of mine and said, hey, I was skinny. Look at me. She was like, do you see the lipomas in your thighs?
Wow.
And I was like, no, I didn't even catch that. So
people can see some of your talks if they just Google Susan Mortarelli, FDRS.
Yep. So the one is on the FDRS channel, Defying Dercums, and that is my talk. And again, you lipedema ladies, again, it's all around lymphatics. So what I do, you asked what I do. I swim 3 times a week. If it's summertime, thankfully for my neighbor's pool, I was able to swim every single day. Compression garments are important, but with Dercums, it is painful. So, I wear them as much as I can because I know that it moves the lymphatics. I do, so like, again, making sure that you're walking, making sure you drink a lot of water. Fluid moves fluid. So I drink half my body weight in water. Again, you've got, wonderful people like Cheryl Skleridge, who talks about food and sensitivities. You've got to know what your food sensitivities are, but just eat healthy. I have a really hard time myself, even though I'll go, low carb, or sometimes my brother has eaten keto for 25 years because of his cancer and has not had an issue with it. Me, I have such a hard time wrapping my head around that something I ate has made me sick. I know that I have insulin resistance. I know that, these things are happening because, again, a lot of Dercum's people have insulin resistance or they're pre-diabetic. So that's kind of interesting. The lipedema ladies, not so much, but they need to worry about that and be concerned about looking at that. Definitely look for thyroid issues and do a full thyroid panel. Ladies that are out there that are trying to figure that out. Don't just settle for them doing your TSH. Look at a full thyroid panel where you get the free T4 and T3, etc. Like, just look that up and you'll understand.
You've just given an amazing amount of advice, and you offer support and help. Now, you have a very localized group, and for good reason. What I so admire about you, Susan, is you're not about the likes, the follows, the shares, getting the numbers on your Facebook page.
I don't want to be known in that way.
Susan's mission is to really help people in her region. And so there is an exclusive group, and it's not meant to exclude, but it's meant to be a real in-practice help to people. Susan's been known to travel 8 hours to help someone when they go to their doctor's appointment. And I just really admire that. Tell us the region so anybody watching who's in that region can follow you.
It was started by Jean Callahan, and it's called Lipedema Strong New England. And really what it is I'm sorry, guys, there's very few there's a lot that have lymphedema, but it's mostly for women. And it's in all 6 New England states. So Connecticut, Rhode Island, Massachusetts, Vermont, New Hampshire, Maine. And we are staying to this region because this is what we want to develop. We have we have about 225 people. And what we're trying to develop is, number one, real support groups, real meet up for coffee, live life, help each other through. Like we said, we want other people to be able to physically go and look and understand how lipedema, lymphedema and Dercums take on these very different body forms in each of our bodies. We have, and so there's one admin in each section, and I am in New Hampshire, so I'm the New Hampshire admin. We've had 3 meetups this summer, even in COVID,
Wow.
at Massabesic Lake, and where we've had anywhere, usually like 6 women or so come, and it's wonderful. It's wonderful to talk things out, especially if you're new to the diagnosis, and trying different things and supporting each other. So, you know, Facebook is great, but it's not like this. It's not
Yeah.
having that friend that you can call. So again, we're looking, especially in the New England region, we want to develop services. We want to develop doctors that will diagnose us. We want to develop areas where you can go and get tested, and therapists, so that we can create this true foundation and
Love it.
support group. Because you know what, we're not going to get people that understand lipedema across the nation and across the world until we set up these medical structures of resources. And that's what this is about. This is about creating resources in the New England area for ladies that live within New England to go and get the support they need to
Well,
get on with their life.
I applaud what you're doing. I think it's wonderful. And I know you also applaud the larger groups that are nationwide and even international, because the bottom line is, as long as you get support, get it, hook up, connect with these communities. I am running out of time. What is your parting words? What are your parting words for our audience today to encourage them?
Just love yourself. You know what? You are more than whatever this label of a disease is. And that's really what I've learned, is that, so my daughter said to me, Mom, like, this is all you talk about anymore. And I said, I get that. I'm like, you're right. You know what? I was not like that. I need to go out, like, you know what, do what you can, but you look in the mirror and love yourself for who you are and who your spirit is, and give of yourself, because that takes you out of it. When people say to me, you know, you're bedridden, and it was like, you know what, when it was like that, I would do whatever I could to encourage someone or support someone, because that would make me feel good about myself. So encourage others and love others, and get out there and tell your doctors, tell your gynecologists, tell your pediatricians, tell them about this disease, so that we spread that knowledge.
Thank you, Susan, for being such a powerful voice and a passionate voice. And I felt you as you were saying all that, and you're just a really special person. And I mirror and acknowledge that message of self-love and self-care that leads to just good things all around. I'm a little choked up.
Thank
So
you so much.
I want to thank all of you for tuning in. If you know someone who would make a wonderful interview for the Lipedema channel, please send them my way. My email address is right on the screen right now. And I want to thank you for joining us. And again, Susan, thank you for all you do. That's it. You're stuck with me. You're a friend for life now.
Absolutely. Absolutely.